Hey guys, so this next unit we're kind of done with introduction to macroeconomics and basic economic concepts, and now we're into kind of like the meat and potatoes of economics. So what you have in front of you is what we're talking about the next couple of days, gross domestic product. And this whole unit is called economic indicators. So I'll write that up here, economic indicators. Economic indicators are what economists look at to measure the health of an economy, health of a country. So they look at several things. They look at GDP, they look at the stock market, the unemployment rate, they look at the level of inflation, they look at a whole bunch of different things, but the main thing they look at is a country's GDP, or gross domestic product. So here is my bullet point of list of the things that we're going to go over in this video. This is not what you need to be like. This is the subtitles. I'm going to be pulling them out to go over what it measures first, and then we'll go over each one of these things. So let's see if I can get a marker here. Okay, so what does GDP measure? So our GDP in the United States is the highest GDP in the world. It is basically if you add up either all of our total incomes of anyone working in the United States, or if you measure all the total spending. Total incomes and total spending, if you add up either of those, you're going to get GDP. And our GDP, I'm really just going to quickly Google, because it's something that I want to know, like the exact amount. Current USA GDP. Okay, 19.39 trillion, that's of last year. Actually, 2018 hasn't even figured, so I wonder if we have GDP per capita, 59,000. That's our GDP divided by our population. Per capita means like per person. So our GDP in the United States is $19.39 trillion. That is what all of our incomes added together is. Or you could say all of our total spending added together. It's going to be the same number because of that circular flow model that we talked about the other day, where we had like households here and businesses over here. Well, we spend money, and that's our spending out of all of our total spending, but then it also becomes like our income, because businesses take that money and they pay their employees when they work for them. So that spending, the spending one was up here on the product market, and the income was down here on that factor resource market. So that is what our GDP is measuring, those two things, total income, or I guess you can measure total spending. If we're looking at GDP, it's not like a perfect measure of the economy because it doesn't include everything. It includes lots of things, which is why it's probably the best measure, but there are things that it does not include. It doesn't include if you get paid under the table, if it's considered like a black market activity, if you sell drugs, or if you're a prostitute, you're not going to report your income to the IRS. So that's money that's not going to be counted for. You don't have to necessarily be doing anything illegal if you're getting paid cash, but if you're doing something like a non-market activity, if you like babysit for your neighbors or something, you might get paid a couple, maybe I don't know, not a couple bucks, but maybe a few bucks an hour. You get paid $50 a night or something. That right there, you're not going to probably pay taxes on it unless you're like a nanny and that's like your profession. You're not going to pay taxes on it, so that's not really going to be included. Same thing if you like mow someone's lawn, like you mow lawns for people on the street and you get $20 a lawn or something. You're not going to be reporting that probably, so that's not going to be included in the GDP. Used products, if it's a used product, so think like Goodwill or garage sales, or a car that was made 2 years ago, or even a house, even if it's a big purchase, like a house that's was built 10 years ago, is not going to count towards this year's GDP. It counted when it was new. You're not going to keep counting the same product over and over again for every time it sells. So those products, think of like eBay, you're not going to be counted. Products that haven't been sold yet. So like if a business makes a product, but they haven't sold it yet, or they didn't sell it that year, it just sat on the shelf collecting dust, we consider that inventory. Inventories don't count. Money made on like buying and selling stocks. Like if you're a stockbroker or something and you get paid like a salary, sure, that's income made, so that counts. But if the stock market doesn't count, because that's not buying a good or a service, you're buying a portion of a company. That's not either of those things. So these are things that GDP does just not take into place. It doesn't count those things. It excludes those things. Along with, I guess I should have written that down. Continuation of this list. It doesn't look at like the quality of life. Just because a country is really rich doesn't mean it's the greatest place to live. They might not have access to clean water. I'm looking at you, Flint, Michigan. They might not have access to, doctors or a good education, or maybe, voting is restricted, or it's a dictatorship. Doesn't mean it's quality of life. Doesn't necessarily mean like rich does not mean a good quality of life. The United States is the richest country in the world by far, but we do not have like the longest life expectancy. Even our literacy rate is passed up by other countries that are poorer than we are. Double count is not a good thing. Double count is something that economists try to avoid. Double count is, okay, let's go back to what it measures. Remember, like I said, it's like if you add up all of money that was spent, if you add up all of our spending, it's the final price that we pay. It adds up the term is market value, but really that means price, the final price. Meaning, well, like, what do you mean like a final price? Well, like, what's the price of a pizza? Here's a pizza. This is pepperoni pizza. Okay, you know what? That looks like a chocolate chip cookie. No, I'll make a pizza. Here's some sauce. Ooh, sauce. That looks good. And some maybe like peppers. All right, there we go. Got a good looking pizza. What's the cost of this pizza? Let's say that it's $9.99. That is the price that you will pay. That is the final price of the pizza. We're not including tax. We're just saying that's the final price of the pizza. That is what is counted. It's what is counted towards GDP. They're gonna count this $9.99 as they are totaling up GDP. What they are not going to count is the ingredients for the pizza. They're not going to add up the cost of the resources. They're not going to be adding up the cost of the peppers or the sauce or the mushrooms or the cheese or whatever, because the price of all of that is already included in the price of the pizza. That $9.99 already includes the sauce. It already includes the crust. It already includes the pepperoni. And so you don't have to add up all the resources. If you did, that would double the price of the pizza, because that $9.99 already includes all of those things. So that's why it's called double count. Double counting is when you do include all of those things. Is when you do say the price of the pizza was $9.99 plus $1 for sauce and $2 for crust, and you add up everything else again. We don't want a double count. That's not a good thing. So double count is like final price of a product, of like a pizza, plus the price of resources. You don't want to do that. That is not what countries need to do or want to do when they count the price of their pizza or of their GDP or the whole thing. Okay, so I'm actually going a whole lot faster than I usually go in class. Maybe we'll cover more stuff. That's fantastic. Okay, so moving double count back, let's talk about good GDP growth. good GDP growth is what we want our economy to grow per year. We say around 2 to 3% of GDP growth per year. We want them to go, GDP going up 2 to 3% annually. Anything more than 3%, the economy is growing at too quick of a rate where we can't continue that process. It's too fast. It is not sustainable. Eventually, you know, what goes up must come down fast. And we don't want to grow any slower than that, because that's pretty close to no growth, which is basically a recession. So we want a good 2 to 3% growth annually. Any more than that, they'll try to slow down. Any less than that, the economy, the Federal Reserve or Congress or whatever, they will try to speed up if it's less than 2 to 3%. Okay. So, let's do GDP versus GNP first, or next. I know we're going out of order. I'll move that one down. So I like to make a little Venn diagram for GDP and GNP. Ooh, that is special. Okay, so I'm going to be kind of ethnocentric here really quick and just focus on the United States. This will work for any other country, but just so we're all on the same page, I'm looking at the GDP and GNP of the United States of America. So we're looking at the USA's GDP and GNP. So GDP is gross domestic product. GNP is gross national product. We used to care about GNP a whole lot more. Like in the 90s, they cared about GNP. But now it's kind of gotten hard to measure, and so we measure GDP. So if you were in the borders of a country and you make a product and it sells, or you are born in the country and you earn an income, you will be part of America's GDP. It's all about the borders in a country. So it's all about like being in the borders. You are domestically here. You're in the borders. Doesn't matter who you are. If you're a Honda dealership, Honda's Japanese. If you're a Honda dealership in the United States, that counts as America's GDP because they are in the borders. But GNP, that's your nationality. It doesn't matter where you are, it's your nationality. So for America, it's just anyone that's American. It doesn't matter where they are. It could be a Ford factory in Mexico. It doesn't matter. They're Ford. That's American. What they share in common, GDP and GNP, is people from that country, they're American, in that country, in America. So we're looking at what they share is Americans in the U.S. So me, like I'm an American in the United States earning an income. I count as America's GDP because I'm physically here, and I am part of GNP because I'm an American citizen. But what else does GDP have? Not just Americans in America, but non-Americans in America, in the USA. So what they have in common is that they are all in the USA. That is what they have in common. It's in the borders of a country. So it doesn't matter if it's an American person or American company or non-American company, as long as they're in the borders. So like non-Americans in USA would be a Honda dealership in the United States. Americans in the USA would be a Ford dealership in the United States. But what they have in common is that they're in the United States. GNP, though, is all about your nationality. It's who you are. It is not based on where you are, it's based on who you are. So not just Americans in the US, but Americans in other countries. So let me go back to my pen. Americans. Like the Ford factory, that's American. Americans in other countries. I think I read that most Ford trucks are actually made in Mexico. They are Ford dealerships in Mexico. So when you are, buying Ford, buy American. Well, technically, it's actually made in another country. So you're supporting their GDP. You're focusing on our GNP, but it's their GDP because they're in Mexico. But still, what they have in common here is that they're Americans. Americans, GNP, USA, GDP. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to lower this. I'm going to do this and just reset the page. I want to reset it and it goes back to looking nice. Okay, let's do our next one, which is the business cycle. It's kind of like a graph. It's not something that you change. It's just a picture, kind of like, it's more like a circular flow model, but it's still on axes. So here's a graph. Here's the origin. We have our GDP over time. Over time, our GDP fluctuates. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. That is GDP fluctuating. But over time, GDP does go up over time, but in the long run, GDP goes up. But there are short run fluctuations. So when GDP is going up, like it is right here, and right here, and right here, we call that a period of expansion. A period of expansion is when GDP is going up. At the very top, if GDP stops going up but hasn't started to go down just yet, are peaks. So we have a peak there, a peak here, it's kind of hard to draw, and a peak right there. That is when GDP stops increasing but hasn't started to decrease just yet. When GDP starts to fall and you start to go down the business cycle, the economy gets worse, you can call that one of two things. You can call that a period of recession, or you can call that a period of contraction. A contraction or a recession. More specifically, a recession is when GDP falls for 6 months in a row. A depression, though, that is 2 years in a row. So we've only been through a depression once, thank God. It was during the 30s, and that was GDP was falling for at least 2 years. The recession that we just went through in 2008, 2009, 2010, that was GDP wasn't falling consecutively that entire time. It had moments where it was falling, but then it would stabilize and then fall again. So since it wasn't consecutive, it was only a recession and not a depression. But when GDP is at the very bottom, when GDP stops falling but hasn't gone up just yet, we call this a trough. Like a horse trough, a trough. Okay, that is the business cycle. Expansion, peak, recession, trough, expansion, peak, recession, trough, expansion, peak, contraction, trough, over and over and over again. Where in the short run we have fluctuations, but in the long run we have good, steady economic growth, hopefully growing at that 2 to 3% annually. Okay, erasing all of that, good stuff. Okay, business cycle goes down here. Did that already. Man, we are moving right along. 18 minutes in and I've said like almost an entire class worth of stuff. Okay, so like I said, our GDP was, what I say, $19.39 trillion. So that's a number. And like I said, we added up all of our spending or all of our incomes to get it. Well, that's the equations of how to get GDP. Like, where did they get that 19 trillion from? They had to do some math. And we'll be doing some math, but it's basically simple math. So the equations for GDP, let's look at the first equation. The first equation is when you add up all the spending. And so they call it the expenditure approach. Expenditure approach. And when you add up all the spending, adding all spending together. This is the one that we're going to be doing the most often. There are two equations, but there is one equation of the two that is the more important one, and it's this one. And it's GDP equals. So GDP, I know, is an abbreviation, but it actually has an abbreviation. That's not GDP. Like, that is abbreviated. And the abbreviation for GDP is the letter Y. So GDP, or Y, equals C plus I plus G plus XN. C plus I plus G plus XN. That is the equation, the expenditure approach of GDP. Well, C, these are all the people that could possibly be spending. These are all the players that could be spending money in an economy. Well, C is us. C is consumption. That's consumer spending. Consumption. If you buy a stick of gum, it classifies under C, consumption. If you buy a pair of jeans, it classifies under consumption. So you buy something. Consumer spending is consumption, and consumer spending is C. That's you. I stands for investment spending. And investment spending has nothing to do with financial investing. It has nothing to do with stocks and bonds or whatever, or savings accounts, retirement accounts. That's not what it is. Investment spending, or I, is just a really fancy way to say business spending. So if you remember from our PPF curves, there's like capital goods and consumer goods. Well, we buy pizza. We buy consumer goods. So like think of consumption as buying the pizza of the consumer goods. So like pizza. While capital goods like pizza ovens would be a type of investment spending, because that's what businesses would buy. They would buy the capital. They would buy labor, land, whatever. They are buying the pizza ovens. And probably taking in a loan to do that. G, that one's pretty simple. G is government spending. Government spending. If they buy, stuff for the military, or they spend money on Medicare or public education, who knows? They spend money on whatever it is. Government spending. Think of like basically guns and butter, talking about our PBF curves. If they spend money on guns and butter, that would be considered G, government spending. And XN stands for net exports. And what net exports is when you take all of our exports that we send out to other countries, that we sell to other countries, and you subtract all of our imports, everything that we buy from other countries, then you're going to get net exports. So net exports is exports minus our imports. Exports minus our imports. So, basically it's Ford minus Honda. So we export Fords and we subtract the dollar amount of Hondas. And so because the United States, we import much more. Our imports are much larger than our exports. We actually have a negative XN because we have a trade deficit. We, export a whole lot more. Wait, hold on. Oh man, I did the wrong, stupid thing. I knew that looked weird. We export a whole lot more than we import. We have a trade deficit. And so, like China. Wait, no, that's not right. Am I going to have to pause this and do over again? I'm thinking of China. I'm talking the United States. Okay, let's try this again. We have a trade deficit. We import more, like oil and almost every clothes that I was right the first time. We import more than we export. China, on the other hand, exports a larger amount than they import. So they have a positive XN. And so because they have a trade surplus. We used to have a trade surplus. And oil got too expensive. So that happens. Okay. Hopefully I didn't completely just screw people up there. I was just trying to make a point that XN could be a positive number or a negative number depending on how much you are importing and how much you are exporting. Is this 10 minus 8 or is this 8 minus 10? So it could be positive, could be negative. So that is the expenditure approach. That's that one we're going to be dealing with for the rest of the semester. C plus I plus G plus XN, consumption plus investment spending plus government spending plus net exports. All that equals our GDP. But there is another, let's see if I can do this. There is another way that you can total up our GDP. You can do all of our total spending or all of our total income. Of course, this is not clicking. confused. Wait, reset. Reset. Fantastic. Okay, that was one equation. The other equation is if you add up all of our incomes. It's called the income approach. And the income approach starts off the same, GDP equals, or you could say Y, because that's the abbreviation for GDP. GDP equals, and this time we're adding up all of our incomes, all the money made. Well, remember, according to the circular flow model, with the household here and the business here, and we give them, well, we earn income because we give them our labor, right? But remember, it wasn't just our labor, it was all the factors of production. Land, labor, capitals, entrepreneurship, all the factors of the FOPs, factors of production. So that's what this equation represents. It's the money made when you sell land, when you sell labor, when you sell capital, and when you sell entrepreneurship. The money made when you sell these things. So when you sell land, you get a rent, R. When you sell labor, you get a wage, or W. When you sell capital, like a pizza oven, you typically have to take out a loan to buy a pizza oven, and so interest. Remember, that's the price of a loan. And then E, when you sell your entrepreneurship, you invent a new product and you are a new entrepreneur, you're on Shark Tank. Hopefully, you will get the last one, which is profit. So RWIP, RWIP is the equation for for GDP if you're talking about the income approach, adding up all of our incomes. Okay. Hopefully, that is not too long. That was 27 minutes. I do want to talk about, you know what, I'm going to give you a couple of definitions now, and then we'll really be applying them when I get back. I get back on Friday. There's going to be a quiz on Friday over all of this. You may use your notes, but make sure you take good notes. Let me move on to, okay, that's unemployment. Okay, yeah, I'm going to give these to you now so we can spend more time actually applying it on Friday as opposed to definitions. So the idea of real versus nominal. Real versus nominal. And this is not just talking along with GDP. This is just a concept between real and nominal. Yes, there is a real GDP and a nominal GDP, but you'll see real and nominal not just in the context of GDP. So real means, the definition is that it is adjusted for inflation. Adjusted for inflation. While nominal is not adjusted for inflation. Adjusted for inflation is real, not adjusted for inflation is nominal. Okay. Also, real can also be called constant. Like using constant prices would be the same thing as saying real prices, and nominal could be current. So if you see what's the current value or the current price, that's another way to say nominal. So real is constant, nominal means current. Okay, what does that mean? Remember, inflation means that the prices go up over time. And my handwriting is suffering. Prices go up over time, which means the value of the dollar is constantly changing. If the dollar used to buy a whole lot, but if prices go up, then the dollar can't buy as much. And when prices go up, that causes something called your purchasing power to change. So your purchasing power is how much your dollar can buy, how much $1 can buy. So if prices are going up, your dollar can't buy as much. So with inflation, prices are going up, but your purchasing power is going down. So here we have the idea of like inflation. Ooh, right. That was the bell for the end of the day. Inflation. makes its prices going up, but your purchasing power goes down. Your purchasing power, you can't buy as much with $1 if things are more expensive. Your purchasing power goes down. If there's deflation, which is your prices are falling, things are constantly getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, your dollar can now buy more because things are getting so cheap that $1 goes further. So your purchasing power goes up. Okay, so the sub is going to be giving you some like handouts to work on. I want you to basically, let's see if I can get it. I'm going to make another quick little video, like honestly quick, not 30 something minutes quick, like this one is, going over it really quick. I said quick way too many times. But hopefully you took some good notes. You can use them on the quiz when I get back on Friday, and we'll go over any questions that you guys have. Or if you have questions as you're watching this, text me through a reminder, send me a message on like Google Classroom or something. I wish I was there. I will see you guys on Friday. And don't forget, Eco Kids, you guys have a quiz on Friday. Open note, but I'm probably going to make it like more than 5 questions, just so I can make sure that everyone is on the same page and taking some good notes. So I will see you on Friday. Have a great rest of your week until then, though.